And now, finally, the one, the only Chef Leopard. I'm sorry, guys, that this one took a while. We've been trying to get this show organized for, what, 2 months now? So, just some background so you guys understand why we're doing this in the first place. So, we've known each other a long time. We've done streams together for probably a couple years now, it feels like, right? And we had organized a debate between him and Ryan Dawson, in which, I mean, that wasn't even a debate. It was just an embarrassment for Ryan Dawson. It was pretty bad. And we were going to do a follow up where we were going to talk about things like Israel and 9/11 and dancing Israelis and all of this shit. And of course, Ryan chickened out and Chef Leopard didn't. And he said, we could still go on your show and we could still talk about this stuff, so let's do it. And here's the thing. I'll read a conspiracy theory or like some weird, whatever, just for the fun of it, or if I need the information for something. But I tend not to, like, I don't care about reading all of this, like, Israel did 9/11 shit. Like, I don't care about what evidence is out there because to me it's just ridiculous. It's like like I was talking about with Lynn Wood. Like, even if they did do it, there's no way I'm going to be able to convince everybody they did or didn't. So it doesn't matter. But he said, then of course it came up with Syrian thought when we were talking about it. So I said, we talked about it. We're going to talk about some shit. So take it away, Chef Leopard.
Well, thanks for the introduction. And yeah, I think maybe it was 3 years ago, or I think it was 2018 I first talked to you, and it might have been more about the Bernie Sanders related story that I was writing about at the time. So it had nothing to do with 9/11.
Oh, it was even before
Uh,
that. We had done some streams together with Analytical Chick where she got together some Hebrew streams where we just streamed out of nowhere just for the fun of it.
right. Yeah, you're right. I think that was like a couple months before
Yeah, before we
what
even
I,
started
yeah,
talking about that stuff.
exactly. So, really, this whole issue that you and Syrian Girl were talking about during that stream, and which I debated with Ryan Dawson, I have to say I disagree with you a little bit about the approach. And I mean, it's everybody's choice what theories they take seriously or not. And most people would agree that it's a huge waste of time to engage with people that have far-fetched ideas. And there's always been very strange threads to the JFK assassination, and even some of the other major assassinations, Malcolm X of the 60s. And I think that there's a reason that you do engage with these people. And it's not always just to refute what they're saying, because you have to look into the evidence before you actually reach a conclusion. But the reason that it's important to engage with them is they crop up for a reason. These things bubble up because the media and society often passes over a major event and doesn't give explanations to major details. And 9/11 is an excellent example of it. I mean, for my generation, it was the key event that we grew up with. I was in 10th grade and I was in earth science class when the towers were hit. So I understand totally the motivation for people like Ryan Dawson, and certainly some of the other people who have come out and questioned the official narrative of 9/11. And I think there's ample reason to say that even if there's not lying about certain facts that were in the official report that came out in the 2000s through the Bush administration, they left a lot out. There's lying by omission as well. But as you probably saw if you watched that debate, or if you watched some of the other streams that I've done about the topic, including with John University, or if you read the blog articles that I wrote about them, the way that this becomes beyond just a conspiracy theory into what really constitutes a libel and a fantasy is when you take evidence that's out there about a suspect and you only include the stuff that seems incriminating, and you completely ignore everything that shows that there was no evidence of guilt. And in his case, and this is something that I brought up during our debate, he couldn't even name what the crime was. So I think for those of you that are out there that are familiar with the five dancing Israelis theory, there is some truth to it, which I didn't know until I started researching it. It wasn't because of Ryan Dawson; it was because of a different journalist named Whitney Webb, who she actually does have some traction with. You know who Ben Swan is, right?
Yeah. Are you talking about the preacher?
No, Ben Swan. You're thinking of Talbert Swan.
Oh,
So Ben Swan is the guy who used to do Reality Check, if you remember that. He would do those five. He has like this sort of local news look, and I think he's on RT now. And basically, I'll have to send you a photo of him. You'll know immediately what I'm talking about. But she actually does some reporting for him now. But she wrote an article for Mint Press News where she was discussing some of the photos that were revealed in a FOIA request concerning the dancing Israelis. And until then, I thought, this like you had thought this had never even happened. None of these people had even been arrested, and it was all just a complete concocted thing out of nowhere. But in fact, yeah, there were five guys, five Israeli movers that were arrested in 2001 on September 11th in New Jersey by Giant Stadium, in fact. And they were held for, I think it was over 2 months in New York and New Jersey in federal custody. And then they were released.
what were they held
And
for?
well, they were held, I mean, they were suspects during the 9/11 inquiries because they were basically, like Ryan repeatedly says, there were people who noticed their suspicious activity. They were seen behaving strangely on that roof, celebrating. There's all sorts of different accounts about how. Well, there's not too many accounts of them celebrating, but there were, of course, the photos that showed them in a jovial mood, according to the FBI report on it. And the whole narrative about it is that they had either, at best prior knowledge, or that they were in on some sort of broader conspiracy that was an inside job concerning 9/11, and you can go on from there, right? There's all sorts of different side theories about who exactly it was that was coordinating it, whether it was the Israelis, whether it was the Bush family, whether it was Saudi Arabia, whether it was a combination of all of them. And really, the problem with all of that is that you can never connect any of those five people with any other thread of the theory, meaning that they were arrested and that was all they were arrested for. The camera that they were supposedly seen holding, the camcorder that would have had the footage of them supposedly celebrating, was never found. There was a still photo camera. And that's an important part of what I was going to bring up about one of Ryan Dawson's um, allegations, which is that he bases a lot of his allegations on this notion that you could know what they were saying based on things that they were doing with the camera that there was no way that they could have done. And I actually wrote about it in a piece that I still haven't published that I was hoping to publish after the second debate. And the fact is that if you read through the FBI report and look at the whole thing, and it's not easy because it's there's a lot of redactions and there's a lot of stuff that is repetitive and witnesses that don't really say anything that's important. But once you get through the whole thing, you start to realize that these guys were at best, morons, right? They were basically these five guys that were illegal workers in New Jersey at the time, and some of them seem to have had a weed habit, and all none of them had any activity that could be construed as professional intelligence capability, at least not while they were in the US. So that's basically my reading of the FBI file. I think it's like 6 sections of documents that they gathered both from the FBI and from state police in New Jersey.
Okay. Here's my issue with all of these kind of weird conspiracy theories. Like, people like to talk about the USS Liberty, right? And they say, oh, well, Israel did it on purpose, which I don't know if that's provable or not. But in the end, Israel said it was an accident. America accepted that. They apologized and they paid restitution. So even if there was evidence that people who are dead, right? Like, at this point, what would it change? Like, what are you asking for? Like, if it turns out that in the 60s they did something bad against America that they've already apologized for and paid restitution for, like, what more could they do? Or you say these Israelis were dancing at 9/11 or whatever, like, you're telling me that the Mossad is so ultra secret they engineered an attack on the World Trade Center, whereas they knocked down both towers. They did this completely under the nose of our intelligence systems, but they were so stupid that they decided to hang around dancing, cheering their operation on right afterwards. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Right. It doesn't make sense to me because, I of course have firsthand knowledge being, I grew up in a house. You know, both of my parents were born in Israel. I lived in Israel for a few years. I served there. So I have firsthand, familiarity with the culture over there and,
I live there as
certain
well,
elements.
so
Right. Yeah. So well, I think one of the reasons that it's so easy for people to believe it is because once you start with one point, which is the five dancing Israelis, and then you leap to a second point, which were two other ones that were arrested in Pennsylvania, also released because there was no criminal activity that they were, but they were from the same company. So they were released. There was no criminal charge that could be levied against them. You start to basically improvise different ways to connect them and to to mix it into 9/11. So the way that they did with there were two other Israelis. One of them, his name was I believe it was his last name was Bootbull, and they were moving, I believe, a household from New Jersey to Ohio, or no, to Chicago. So they made they long story short, they drove all the way from New Jersey to Chicago through Ohio on September 10th. So they passed through the area south of the crash site of Flight 97, or is it Flight 93? I think United Flight 93, the one that crashed in Pennsylvania. So they basically drove on the Pennsylvania Turnpike south of the crash site the day before 9/11, right?
mm-hmm.
Now, nothing happened while they were going through the turnpike, except that they were pulled over at one point for, I guess, veering into traffic while leaving a rest stop. And then they continued to Chicago, and then they came back, on the 12th. And they were stopped on the 12th on Route 80, which is in northern Pennsylvania, nowhere near the crash site. Now, the way Ryan Dawson and other people like him, if you watch Ryan Dawson's 5-hour video, his film that he rents out for, I think, $25 on his site. Basically, he would like you to believe that during that journey, they somehow planted the passport of one of the hijackers, and that was the passport that was found in the days after 9/11. And this is so what they'll usually do is they'll fill in literally any plot point that they need to be explained in order to use the evidence that is out there that places these people just the general area, in this case in the same state as one of the crash sites, in order to make them culpable for the rest of the act. So that's how basically these, it's beyond just a conspiracy theory. I think it's a culture of belief here, and you basically manipulate the facts that are available in documents like the FBI file in order to have it make sense, even if you never get anywhere.
So here's my issue, and I was just talking about this for the past hour, right? Is when you give credence to crazy people, right? Like Ryan Dawson is a crazy person. Like he's a nice guy, and after I destroyed him in that debate, like I didn't have a problem being civil with him afterwards, which is why he came on the show to discuss like certain things. Like he came on to discuss censorship and all of that. But he's a crazy person. Like the things that he says, it's just like Syrian Girl, right? Like in order for him to have the knowledge that he claims to have like he claimed that Israelis were wearing diapers on missions, or him and Syrian Girl will go on social media and go, Israeli troops are moving into a certain town in Syria or Lebanon, which isn't true. And right now they're doing X, Y, and Z, right? Like, in order for him to know he's either himself or he's making it up, or he's connected so high to Arab intelligence that he has access to secure military uh, messages between military people. So all of that aside, I don't believe he's Mossad. I don't believe that a guy who streams from his bedroom in Japan is connected to Arab intelligence so high that he can actually get real time military movements like from them. And since I don't believe that he has access to American military, you know, data, and even if he did, I don't think that would matter. I have to assume that he's a crazy person and that he makes all this shit up. This is just kind of what he seems to do. Now, Syrian Girl is the same thing. Like, she claims she was born in Damascus, but from what I understand, she hasn't lived or been there in decades. She lives in Australia. But yet she claims to know all of this stuff about Hezbollah and troop movements and Israeli attacks and all of this stuff. But she has what seems to be no connections to any of these places. So again, she's either foreign intelligence, Israeli intelligence, or Australian intelligence, which I don't believe she's any of those things. I think what she is a girl who likes men simping for her online, so she plays to this crowd, right? Now, think about Ryan Dawson and Syrian Girl, right? Their main audience are a bunch of neo-Nazi wignats, right? Who spend 90% of their day talking about how the West is being flooded by filthy mud people, that are taking over their cities and raping their daughters. And then in the same breath, they're siding with them because after all, they don't like Jewish people or they don't like Israel. So I think that they're smart enough to know how to get money, which is what they're doing. I don't believe that I should give any of their theories any real credit because listening to crazy people makes you a QAnon person. It makes you a person that's. I was talking about Lynn Wood. Like Lynn Wood is saying right now, he's tweeting it, he's been all day. He's literally saying the reason why so many people are compromised, like Nancy Pelosi and Biden and John Roberts and Lindsey Graham and all of them, is they were kidnapped by a deep state cabal and forced at gunpoint to rape and murder a child on video camera and told if they don't play ball with the deep state, these videos will come out and they'll go to jail and they'll be embarrassed and their whole careers will be over. And there are thousands of people that are retweeting this garbage going, ooh, now the Dems are really fucked. Like they thought, like, wait until this comes out. They won't be able to recover. If we pay attention to these people, if we give these people energy, if we give these people the time of day, to me, it seems like all we're doing is being part of the problem.
Well, so I see what you mean by that, but to clarify what I mean, I don't think that addressing, for example, the dancing Israeli theory or addressing some of the other, there's always been theories about the JFK assassination. The movie JFK by Oliver Stone, believe it or not, is just as ridiculous as many of the theories you were talking about. It concerns, of course, a trial that happened that was based largely on hearsay and rumors about, I don't remember his name, but this New Orleans businessman who people overheard somebody in a bar talking about all these gay guys that conspired with the CIA to kill Kennedy. So the reality is that a lot of these theories, maybe not the theory we're talking about with 9/11, but certainly the theories with Lynn Wood, they are empowered because there's a reason they get amplified. One of the reasons, like I said before, is that when there are major events that the media and society doesn't want to actually examine honestly and with painstaking precision, which they don't have time to do because it doesn't make good TV to do it, or because they have a vested interest in hiding certain issues, then people fill in the blanks. And I think Linwood is taking advantage of it the way that you're talking about. I think so. But to steer back to Syrian Girl and Ryan Dawson, I think if you're talking about their motivation, why they do it, the money motive, I think that certainly
I didn't say money. I
uh,
said more attention. It's more about
more
getting
attention,
attention.
right? Or maybe they've developed, some sort of community around them that believes in this, and for them it's very important for them to continue to represent for this community. This, for them it's like the culture that they've built around themselves, the 9/11 truth community. And that's exactly why people like Ryan Dawson do it, because you can actually see, if you go back into his videos and see several years back, there are feuds within the 9/11 community over which theory is actually the one that people should be pursuing, right? The controlled demolition theory. There's people who talk more about the element of what's the guy's name, Silverstein, the guy who owned Building 7. There's a lot of different theories that are, and there's each theory has its own advocates. So in many cases, it's an ego issue. So what, like you're saying, the more you address these people, you're actually feeding their ego, right? Like Ryan Dawson has had feuds with other 9/11 theorists. I think he actually has feuded with Christopher Ballin. When I brought up during the debate Whitney Wood, he basically dismissed her as a kook. I mean, it's ironic that he thinks that she's crazy when she's alleged things that are far less ridiculous than he has, right? She's
He
gotten a
does the
lot of
same with
details
Alex
wrong,
Jones.
right? Yeah. So the issue, a lot of it does have to do with ego, but you do notice that once you actually drill into the document and the evidence that's in there, he didn't really want to talk about it. He didn't want to talk about the specifics. He didn't want to answer any questions, and he's not answered, like the main question that I asked him, that I got to ask him before he left, was
Before he
where
ran,
was his.
let's be honest here. He
Right.
ran.
He left he ran that day, and he did agree to come back the following day, and he never came back. So, I was all, I still would go back on stream again, even though, unlike you, I don't really respect him as a person
I
at
don't
all.
either.
But the fact is that I asked him, produce any evidence that the Israeli suspect that he called a neighbor of two of the 9/11 hijackers, Yaron Shmuel, produce any evidence that he lived next door to them. And he never has. And he never will, because you can't find the evidence. And I actually drilled in and looked through it. So it might be that it's a waste of time for people to go through that much trouble, because the fact is that he has a much bigger audience than I do. And a lot of people don't really care about this topic. But I can tell you that this issue will be recycled in the future, because new generations are growing up. They didn't live through 9/11. For them, this topic will be fresh in their mind. They won't have to. They won't have the benefit of sort of dismissing it because they heard it years ago and it was some idiot that snort that huffs paint that was talking about it. A lot of these theories that are far-fetched, they get recycled in the future for various reasons. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to debate it, and that I wanted to document, my my case refuting him, right? Because in this case, it's almost like he's he's delivering the case against the suspects. I'm delivering, I guess, the defense. And there's not much evidence that, first of all, that they did a crime, and many of the things that he uses as evidence basically don't indicate anything. For example, there's a suspect list that was leaked by a guy who I think he sees as a mentor. His name was Justin Raimondo. He's now deceased. And it was a list of thousands of suspects after 9/11. And one of the guys who was on it was the United Moving Systems owner, the guy that they allege is a Mossad agent. But if you actually look at a lot of the suspects that are on the list, including some of the businesses, they're still in business today. So what evidence is it that if you're a suspect on a list that you're guilty of it? Because if those people were suspects, are they all Mossad agents? There was a deli in like Southern California that was on the list. So really, it might just be because I started to notice that this had, a great niche audience, these people that believe in him. And I felt that it had to be, I guess, answered. But, people come up with these theories, they promote them, and some of them go much farther than Ryan Dawson's theories. But I think it's often worthwhile to, address them and make sure that there's a second side to be seen.
Okay, so I want to answer just somebody from the chat real quick. Lunishin says, if it's about attention, what do they have to gain from that attention? What type of people are they? And if it's about money, what do they plan to use the money for? So you're talking about two different people, right? Ryan Dawson, he started this probably just because it allowed him a place at the cool kids table. Like he could go online and be edgy and make friends because he's not that personable and he doesn't seem all that bright. He claims he has like 160 IQ. I don't know if I buy that. But at this point, he's totally doxxed. He's basically unhireable. And he lives in Japan where he doesn't really speak the language. He doesn't have any work experience that could help. Like he has a family. Like this is how he makes money. For Syrian Girl, the answer is because she's a woman. Women do this for attention. She loves the fact that people simp for her. She loves the fact that people tell her how much they want to, see her titties and shit like that. Like, she likes people paying attention to her. But now back to what you were saying about, like, the JFK assassination and 9/11 and, all of this stuff. What they all definitely have in common for me, I don't particularly care. Like who really, like, I would be interested to know who actually shot JFK or like what the whole conspiracy, like I'd like to know the truth. I don't believe the truth will ever be presented in a way to me where it'll be so definitive that I could say, oh, that's what happened. Like there'll be hundreds of theories, there'll be lots of conspiracy theories, there'll be all kinds of shit. But at this point, we're never going to know what actually happened, right? With 9/11, we were told it was Osama bin Laden, we were told it was these Arabs, we were told all of this stuff, right? We were told all of this. And we can sit back and go, okay, no, it really was controlled demolition. It really was the Mossad. It really was Bush. It was, whatever you want to say. It doesn't matter. There's no way that we could ever prove any of that definitively at all. So we can either just accept that either they lied to us and we'll never know the truth, or that what they told us is probably mostly true and we could just go on with our lives because nothing's going to bring back 9/11. And, the victims of 9/11. No, nothing is going to stop these forever wars that were started because of 9/11, it seems. So me caring, yes, I debate these people too. Obviously, I just debated Syrian Girl the other day. I've debated Dawson. I consider doing it more for fun. And also because there's something very important that comes with debating these people. Like, I didn't get into the weeds with Syrian Girl or Ryan Dawson in terms of, some specific bullshit that they've said. If I were to do that, I would, A, be doing it all night long, and all I'm doing constantly is being asked to prove a negative. They would go, well, Israel did X, Y, and Z. What say you? And what am I supposed to say? No, they didn't. That's like saying, then they would go, oh, that's exactly what someone who's covering for Israel would say. You can't prove someone didn't do something. Especially when the person who claims they did do it made it up.
So the fact is, like I get it. I have a different approach from you. We have different opinions, me and you. I come a little bit more from, I would say I'm more liberal and libertarian than you are. But in terms of the approach too, I came at this because I was interested in the topic itself, right? So that's a huge difference between us, right? Me and you. Because I discovered that there was something that these people had latched onto. And then once I discovered what they were twisting and the people that they were affecting, because remember, those 5 people that they're alleging are Mossad agents are real people. So it has a micro importance, right? For those 5 people, they can't really travel abroad to certain areas because there's people who know their names, and because their names are public record after all now, and they have to live with this accusation that hangs over their head, just like people who are accused of rape, just falsely accused of rape, just like people who are accused of all sorts of crimes that they did not commit or that there's no action. People who are libeled, they have to live with it. So the standpoint that I come from is that it's not really about defending. Uh, you know, some people they say, well, this is about including the person who one of the people who helped me research this. He wanted to do it. He wanted me to do it because he thought this was about defending Israel from libel. But in reality, I don't really think that this is an issue of Israel or the Jews like Ryan Dawson does. I think it's an issue of the fact that this guy, he comes around, he masquerades as an anti-war activist, as the anti-neocon. That's what he calls himself, and he talks about himself as a big Ron Paul supporter. But would the real Ron Paul, and I know Ron Paul has some of these people who are in his movement, but would the real Ron Paul be a believer in holding people to be guilty without adequate proof? I don't think so. I mean, I was a supporter of Ron Paul back in the day as well, and it really is. I think it's sort of an issue of where is this idea of libertarianism even going, right? Is it about just tearing at little threads in the official narrative and trying to look after all of these conspiracy theories, which I know are important for some people? Or is it about defending people's privacy, defending their legal rights, their civil rights and civil liberties and all of that? That's where my standpoint is. And I know that Ryan Dawson isn't like this towering figure that, he doesn't have actual authority, right? It's not like I'm fighting Eric Holder or something. But that's the standpoint that I took it to be, that he's accusing 5 people falsely of something they didn't do.
No, and listen, I agree with you in terms of, okay, I don't think that even when you humiliate Dawson, like I humiliated him, you humiliated him, like he gets humiliated all the time. In fact, almost every time he says he's going to like throw his hand into debating, he just makes an asshole out of himself. So, okay, he makes an asshole out of himself. But the thing is that even if you completely debunk what he says, it's not going to change life for those Israelis at all. Number one. And number two, like I said, like Syrian girl wanted to keep nailing me like, oh, well, Israel did X and Israel did Y or Israel did Z. And I just kept saying the same thing over and over again. Well, I don't really give a shit. Like they're a foreign country. They do what they want. I don't really care. Like we live in a world where might makes right. And we live in a world where woe to the conquered. And
Well,
if,
I think there was a moment. So to go to the Syria debate between you and her, there was a moment I think that was more effective than any of that you said, and it was when she started to say, "Well, if we didn't attack Pearl Harbor, if this didn't happen," and you said, "But it did happen. These things did," and that's I think that's different from what Ryan Dawson does. But she's one of these people.
well, because she's not
She's
that
very
bright.
speculative. Right. She is a person. I think she's indicative of the type of audience that Dawson or some of these 9/11 theorists have, which are people who they want to basically draw connections between things by just inventing a relationship, right? And I saw that it was pretty funny. She started to connect things that have nothing to do with each other, like trying to claim that the British were some sort of enabler of the Zionist plot, and they were trying to basically use the Jews in order to expand through the Middle East and get their tendrils in there in the name of the Rothschild banking. And what you did, I think you did reply. You said that, well, the British inhibited a lot of the Jewish agency, the Israelis' plans to bring more people into the mandate of Palestine. And if you look at the actions of the British government, their policies with the white paper and with, their other immigration policies during the war, You can't really make the case that they were doing it according to her design. Now, of course, the audience might just choose to disregard what you're saying entirely because they don't care. You know, people go into these debates. The people who went into the debate with Dawson and they had their minds made up anyway. Sometimes that there's nothing I could say that would cast any doubt on what he was saying. But the fact is that he ran away and I didn't. And I think that if people watch a debate and they analyze his responses and they think about the actual issues and the people that are involved in what he's alleging, they can't find a way to actually square the circle, right?
Hmm.
When he can't actually name this guy who supposedly he has all these facts in his head and he knows all the connections. Everybody says Ryan Dawson knows the entire story. And when you ask him, where did he live next to Mohammed Atta? He doesn't have a fucking clue. He doesn't have any clue because he is making a lot of it up, like you said. And some people do notice it, and it's not just in this context. There are people who have gotten sour on him because they see that he's basically filling in the blanks. You know, people who are more extreme towards the 9/11 truth side, they start to say, well, you're starting to shit on the controlled demolition theory. Well, there's much less evidence for what you're saying, and yet you're calling us wackos, right? So maybe the problem solves itself, like you were saying, because these people are so self-centered and obsessed that they start to turn on each other. But I still think that it's sometimes worth it to examine the topic. I mean, it's really up to your own motivation. If you're not really interested in what happened with those five people, then obviously you're not going to go through the entire FBI file. But I found people who they've watched the stream and they've said, look, I mean, this answers a lot of questions for me.
So for me, again, I have no problem. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't look into it or you shouldn't be interested in it. I'm saying like the reason that I took all of these blood sports debates, right? Number one is just because when I see someone like Mike Enoch or someone like Ryan Dawson or someone like Syrian Girl, when I see them posting on social media, right? And I say to myself, wow, this person is actually retarded. Like they're so stupid it begs the question how they dress themselves, let alone try to claim leadership of some kind of movement, right? So I just appreciate the opportunity. Like I don't give a shit what that audience thought. I don't at all. They hated me before I got there. They hated me just as much when I left. Okay, but for me, it's just I like the opportunity to be able to say like, okay, this guy is a moron, and this is why, right? And like I don't have to justify my beliefs to anybody but myself and my family, right? Like the people who watch me, they watch me because of the way I look at things, right? And if someone wants to come on and challenge me, I've always said I'm open to anybody who has criticism of me. Knock yourself out. Let's do it. You know, like I'm fine with that. So I don't care if someone wants to challenge me. The fact that these people, the moment that you're not willing to apologize to them, they run off like scared children. Just show, like after the beating I gave Mike Enoch, he basically went on Luke Ford's show afterwards and cried. You know, Dawson, like I thought he was going to cry on the stream. You know what I'm saying? Like after the stream with Marcolette, like people looked at Marcolette and I was getting emails left and right like, "Oh wow, I just didn't realize he was retarded." Like I realized that like maybe may be off on some things, but he's just retarded. You know, and like with Syrian Girl, it's the same thing. Like, do I think that I changed her or any of her followers' minds? No. And I wasn't trying to. But for me, I mean, the main reason I took that one, just for the fun of it, is to show that this is why women shouldn't be in politics. Like, this is why women shouldn't be commenting on these things because all you're getting is a glorified, like, anti Jewish OnlyFans. And that's why I kept saying it. Like, it's just, I was there to just have fun. So,
Right, but like, I mean, I guess that's like a difference. I mean, you know, obviously you go on blood sports a lot, or you
I
have in
used
the
to.
past.
I don't anymore.
Right, and you know, I had somebody once approached me with the opportunity, and he said, you know, go on blood sports, and I said, you know, what was it, the Kill Stream with
Yeah.
Ralph,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I have a much smaller profile than you, and I asked him, you know, what's going to be the topic, and he said, well, we don't have a topic. I said, well, I'm not interested because it's a different motivation for me. I do like to get into the nitty gritty on the topic. I don't really care. Like Ryan Dawson can like go fuck himself. Like I don't really care about him. I think he's not the smartest in the 9/11 community, not by a long shot. He's a plagiarizer, and I did a lot of work. Maybe it was fruitless work to show that he did pretty sloppy work even for that segment of the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're interested in the topic, then it's more than just scoring points on someone or just prove it. Like I don't think I really proved myself during that debate in order to get more attention for myself, right? Everything I write about is usually completely unrelated to the 9/11 topic. A lot of it is related to stuff that is more current events or investigative journalism that I think does pass the bar of credibility, right? Because I try to go to original documents and I try to avoid casting aspersions and making accusations that I can't prove, right? So it's a different motivation, and I don't really like personally. I don't care if people think it's like a sideshow because I do believe, and this happened last year, and I was, maybe I was wrong, and I think it's been proven that I was wrong about this, but it looked like the 9/11 five dancing Israelis theory was making a comeback during the whole Groyper saga, right? They were constantly talking about it, and that's how things start. Things sometimes spread like wildfire because that's how rumors work. And basically, what ended up happening was that I think that their tendency sort of ate itself alive as well. So maybe this was just me, looking at something as a threat that wasn't as big of a threat as I thought it was. But the fact is that these things come back in cycles, right? And these will be the topic of debate in the future. And I think when future generations are born, they're not going to have the benefit of looking at 9/11 and being able to simply discard this as a crackpot theory because they're going to be further away from it, right? It looks more blurry to them.
So I agree with you on that, but because I actually know what's going on, as opposed to having some warped, just anti-Jew whatever, like I don't necessarily have a problem with Fuentes' America First stuff, right? But the fact that he so disproportionately has these issues with Israel, it's not my problem. Like it's not like I feel like he's doing any damage to me. In fact, he's doing the damage to himself and to the people that follow him. Like when the Groypers started becoming like a bit ascendant, right? Like they were breaking into like Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk and Dan Crenshaw lectures and asking about the USS Liberty, right? I did a video like right after that, and I said, if they want to sink their movement, this is the most surefire way to do it, right? Let's look at Crenshaw as a perfect example, right? Crenshaw is anti-gun. He's not very right wing. He's not very based. Like he won his primary
A
by this.
neoconservative.
What?
He's kind of a neoconservative.
Exactly. And he won his seat by the skin of his teeth, right? And in fact, there was a decent chance he was going to get primaried and lose. There was a decent chance he was going to get primaried and lose when he ran for re-election. Okay? They cemented his win because instead of having to answer questions about why he's anti-gun, instead of having to answer questions why he supports these forever wars, he was just able to come out and suck Israel's balls in front of all the evangelical Christians in his district and say, I love Israel, I would die for Israel, right? And it was over. He's the darling of them. Charlie Kirk's the same way, right? Like, if you want to just realize like that calling him a cuck and calling him like pro-transsexual and anti-family, like those are arguments that hold water. When you start accusing him of being too pro-Israel, the evangelicals that give TPUSA all their money, they start drooling when he comes out and says he supports the IDF. They start drooling when he does all of this. So not only do the Groypers hurt themselves, but they strengthen the people they're trying to attack with it, right? And when they were like, oh, we got into another lecture, we made Ben Shapiro like look stupid. All Ben Shapiro did, like pre-COVID, was just stop letting them in, or he had somebody hold the mic when it was Q&A time, and then like when someone went, "I say you debate," and then they just turned the mic off. You know, like, and people would go, "Oh, well, why won't you debate Nick Fuentes to Ben Shapiro?" And he didn't even bother dignifying it with an answer, because why would he? Right? The real answer is he's going to say, "I have a platform of," and remember, I can't stand Ben Shapiro, right?
Right.
But at
Yeah.
the same time, he has a platform of what,
Another thing me and you agree on.
like he has a platform of what, 50 million people, like
Right.
that watch his show. He's like probably one of the biggest like conservative podcasts out there. Like I wouldn't share if I were him. Why would I share my platform with someone that my audience basically universally despises, especially when I don't agree with him? You know?
So, I think, that's a good point. I think, you know, going up against Conservative Inc. I mean, you make a good point that maybe that's why they weren't really a success. I have a different idea of why they started to fail, which was that, definitely, like, I'm not discounting what you're saying, but the problem with Nick Fuentes is that this is a guy, he's only, what, 22 years old, or is he
He's a
younger
young
than that?
guy. We could just
Yeah.
agree he's a young guy. I don't know. He's
He's,
22,
yeah,
23, something like that.
yeah, he's like and I don't really care. Obviously, he can have his show, and his show's kind of funny sometimes, but he started to make a lot of these videos about, sexuality and about the benefits of chastity and the anti-porn crusade, and what else, about how divorce is unethical, and a lot of very Catholic heavy, moralistic claims, and people don't really give a shit about that. They don't want to be brought, and because a lot of the people out there, believe it or not, did get divorced. A lot of the people out there have, they have spouse from another race or whatever, and these are things like, you don't gain people by talking about this. You actually make yourself look like a, just a wanker, right? He's like, he went into some stuff that isn't really a topic of conversation beyond the YouTube universe, right? So, you know, and especially as someone who, he's pretty young, he doesn't have much life experience, and a lot of his professional experience is getting kicked out of different, you know, circles that he's been in. People don't want to hear and be lectured by him, especially not people who have real jobs and real lives to live, right? So that to me was one reason I think that the Groypers didn't become what they thought they would be. The Bears are, they are who they thought they were. Well, the Groypers aren't. So um, that's basically why I think they failed. Now, obviously, I don't think that they helped themselves by, barging into these conferences and, berating Rob Smith and things like getting into a fight with some gay black guy over something that to them is important, but nobody else cares about. So the bottom line is, though, that they did bring a lot of visibility to the theory for a little while, to the 9/11 theory. So all I'm saying is, these are younger people. They're in their late teens to early 20s. They didn't live through the 9/11 experience firsthand, so it's easier for them to believe in it, and their target audience, is people in their peer group. And as we go forward, people who have an agenda to sell this theory, they're going to have more fertile ground, because there's just going to be people who don't have the context of having lived through it and maybe examine the evidence, from a more close standpoint.
And I agree and we'll unpack a couple of these things, and then I got to run. But I mean, let's get into a couple of the things that you said. Okay, number one, I told Fuentes right to his face during our second talk, which was not as crazy as the first, obviously. But I told him, I said, listen, one day I'm going to see you on Fox News, or you're going to be the edgiest Home Depot manager that ever lived. Because like the guy's got talent. He knows how to speak. He knows how to do whatever, but he tends to be very self defeating, right? Like it's very self defeating when you talk about, let's say, Catholic values, right? Like he actually told me in our debate that America was founded as a Catholic nation, which just shows that he doesn't know what he's talking about. But like he claims like all this stuff, like, oh, I would never have sex before marriage, I would never do this, degeneracy, this, and all of this. Like he talks a good game. Then he has all these streams with like transsexual catboy weirdos that like, you know, are complete degenerates, right? Like he talks about like, oh, people shouldn't race mix and all of this stuff, but he's not white. Like he's Hispanic. You know, like all of these type of contradictions don't help anybody. Secondly, and I'll tell you this story because it's an interesting one. I think I've told it on the stream before, right? You saw Sargon when he ran, and remember, Sargon's a friend of mine. I love his content.
Right.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
But he ran for a UKIP seat in the United Kingdom, right? Now, this guy has more than 1 million followers on YouTube. He's got huge followings on social media. And because he lives in that world, he believes that that translates into real life, right? That type of support translates into real life. And obviously, the fact that he got like 4 votes showed that it didn't, right? Now, I have a friend, Orthodox Jew. He was at one of the, like, he lives there, so there was, like, he couldn't avoid it anyway. But he was at one of these BLM protests, I think in Philadelphia, right? And he had on a Count Dankula shirt when he was at the protest. Now, all of these joggers started running up to him and telling him he's not a real Jew because he's not black and calling him all kinds of anti-Semitic names. And, you know, like, all of this, like, the ADL came out against him because they were like, oh, he's probably just a plant, like, because he had the Dankula, right? And other Jews were like, oh, yeah, the guy's probably not even Jewish. He's probably there just to cause trouble, right? He's just claiming to be Jewish. And he asked me about it, and he said, well, how do I explain the Dankula shirt in a way that normies will understand? And I said, you can't. There's no way you can explain that without a person being involved in internet meme culture or YouTube culture. Because otherwise you just sound retarded trying to explain it, right? Like you can't say to a normie like, look, I know you guys think it's bad that he's dressed in a Nazi uniform and he has a whole bunch of pugs goose-stepping in front of him. But you have to understand that he made a video where he wanted to fuck with his girlfriend, so he taught his dog to do the Nazi salute whenever he yelled gas the Jews, and they arrested him for it in Scotland. Like, isn't that some weird, funny, fucked up shit? Like, most people would be like, even if that is like whatever, like why are you wearing a t-shirt for this guy? Like, what are you, retarded? You know, like why are you wearing like a shirt with like pretend Nazis on it? Like you don't gain anything from this, right? And he kept saying, but what if I say this or what if I say that? I said, there's no way you can do it without sounding retarded. Like you just have to just ignore it, you know? And I think that especially in like the kind of, if you see where first it was the alt-right, right? And they were all the ones that followed Milo and all of them. And then they all of a sudden, when the Nazis took over, most of them just took off. But there's always been this core, this like few thousand people that used to watch all the blood sports. Then after blood sports, it was, might have been the Groypers. I don't remember the progression, but there was always something, right? It was the Groypers, then it was this, then it was that. And it's always this core group of people. Now, if they're your core audience, it's a few thousand people, they donate money, like, you feel like you're making a point. You feel like you're getting your point across. But these people will agree with you just until they don't. You know, the minute that you come out and say something that they disagree with, they'll just move on to whatever the next trendy neo-Nazi thing is. Right? And so right now he's riding the wave, and all the best to him. But he has no prayer of influencing anything. Now, when I first started taking the debates, I also saw that they were kind of ascendant, that the alt-right was kind of ascendant. And I thought, okay, if I lay a beating on this Mike Enoch guy or Nick Fuentes or any of them, you know, it'll stop this ascension. But then I started watching, like, everyone knows I joke about this. When I went on that first show with JF, right? And I was like, oh, fuck Nick Fuentes and fuck all these people. And they're like, well, Nick Fuentes and Mike Enoch are going to show up tonight. I had been calling Fuentes out for weeks. But who I really wanted to get to was David Duke. And a friend said, well, if you're going to meme all them online, like, if you just throw memes at David Duke, what'll happen is he'll just block you and that'll be it. So pick like a few of these people that you, and someone said, oh, use Nick Fuentes, David Duke, and I forgot, there were a few others. Oh, Paul Nalen was also the one I really wanted.
Hmm.
When they said Nick Fuentes will be here in an hour, I had never heard his voice before. I had never seen any of his content. It was just someone told me I should include him in the memes that I was using to call out Nayland and Duke. And then they were like, "Oh, and Mike Enoch's going to be here." And I was like, "Oh, fuck Mike Enoch. I'll kick that motherfucker's ass." And like, whatever. Never heard of him before. Never. Never heard a word he said. No idea who he was. Then they said, "Oh, he can't come tonight. He'll come next week." And I'm thinking to myself, "Well, that's good because now I can at least find out who the fuck he is." Right? And I started looking into it. I'm expecting to find like a Paul Nayland type who was running for Congress and probably had a decent chance of winning before he went insane. Right? And instead, I find this kind of like Slavic guy who can't really make sense unless he's trying to yell something that doesn't make sense. And that the only reason people think he wins debates is because he gets these really timid people to debate him that just go, "Well, yeah, you're right about this. And I'm sorry that Jews do this, but you have to understand." And then he's won the argument already. So I just went on and I just basically called him a fucking a joke, and just was like, dude, you sit here and you're talking about like Jewish subversion or whatever. Like you were married to a Jewish woman, like doing alt-right podcasts in your closet, hoping she didn't overhear you. Like you're a fucking joke. And that's all I did with him. I just went after him for being a fucking joke, And then I realized like, okay, these people are just like, they're not a threat. It's just a good time at the time, it was a good time to go after these people. Now, I don't give a shit at all. Like, if I saw Mike Enoch on TV tomorrow and he was talking to fucking Brett Baer, I wouldn't care at all. Right now, the issue is the commies. Right now, we have to take care of the commies, and the commies come first. All these alt-right people who think that they're going to build their ethno-state on the ruins of America, they're going to be the first one killed if there's any kind of conflict going on here. They have no life skills. They have no weapons training. They have no nothing. They keep calling for a boogaloo that'll just find them going to gulags. So now I don't care at all. But so yes, you can answer whatever. I didn't see the question you want to answer.
Okay. So you asked, what's your opinion of Nick's cohorts in the traditional Catholic movement, like Vincent James or E. Michael Jones? So actually, I think me and Halsey once chatted about Vincent James offline, and the truth is, I think, they both have, a little bit. They have like a little bit of intelligence, but it's not enough to actually, put forward like real coherent arguments, right? Not in the modern sense. Now, E. Michael Jones, you might say that I'm exaggerating here, but believe me, when you saw the stream with E. Michael Jones debating porn with Styx
I
Hexenhammer,
saw it. I actually watched
it's
that one.
obvious that the guy doesn't understand modern technology or the internet.
Dude, E.
And
Michael
and I'm
Jones is a Down syndrome version of the Lucky Charms leprechaun. The guy doesn't make any sense, and he just thinks that if he kind of, I don't know, talks about Jesus a lot and talks about logos, that all of a sudden, people are going to give a shit what he has to say. Like he's such a spurg that I don't even know why people give him any time at all. And Vincent, I was close with Vincent in terms of like I think he's a nice guy. I think he might have gone a little more off the rails and become a little more absolutist lately. But at the time, like I remember I was on a debate stream with him once, and I was on like another stream with him. But the trad cath people, like the people that think they're converting the world over to Catholicism, the Pope is like the biggest cuck on the planet. Like he's more of a commie than the commies are. So I don't know how they can argue that like Catholicism is ascendant right now. You know?
well, so yeah, sorry, you broke up for a second, so I'm sorry if I interrupted you, but I think the traditional Catholic movement, like I personally, I have the most hands-off approach. I don't really care what religion people are. I don't like literally don't care. Mormon, Muslim, Catholic, but like you said, if there's one religion that's impossible to work out all the corrupt elements, it's Catholicism because it's so institutional and so there's so many interests, financial interests in there, and obviously sexual interests and all these corrupt influences. Like the idea that these traditionalist Catholics, like not just E. Michael Jones, like there's a guy Michael Voris who I think he's actually sincere. He wants to reform the Catholic Church and make it more of a community of the faithful, but it's not going to work because
Okay, you have to
they're
hold
not
on
the.
1 second. I've had this issue with
Yeah.
my OBS lately that my system runs out of memory. Guys, we'll be back in literally 30 seconds. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So keep going. I'm sorry, that's just something I have to do.
So right, I don't really have a problem with, like, if you want to live a traditional Catholic life, I think, I don't believe in Catholicism, obviously. I'm like Halsey, I'm also Jewish, but these guys are moral dictators, really, and including Vincent, and I used to admire a lot of the videos and content that Vincent James produced, but then I looked into some of his writing, and to be honest, I think that he is pretty dishonest, especially some of the stuff that he used in order to try to prove that the Jews control the media. Basically, he plagiarized a list from some fan site from circa 2005 of people who are already like long retired who were Jews in the media. Many of them were not even Jewish, right? It was just a fan site that it was some sort of like Jewish cultural society of, I don't remember. It was like some town in the Midwest,
Mm-hmm.
and he basically just copied and pasted it, and just elaborate a little bit. And that's what that's what he did in that case. So, I think people, I believe people should be able to put forward even like ridiculous stuff, even the stuff that we were talking about earlier, like Ryan Dawson. And I think the public can judge, hopefully, between what's credible and what's not credible. But sometimes I think you do need to respond to certain things. Like the 9/11 thing, that was something I thought was worthwhile. But you do see, Halsey, that these people, when their ego gets in the way, like Paul Nealon, what he was doing at a certain point, just because you brought him up, that's the Achilles heel of the alt right. It's not their belief system, it's their egos. Paul
Oh, I know.
Nayland, Paul Nayland, he started to attack Jared Taylor. I believe he called Jared Taylor a Jew at one point.
He called
And
everybody who disagreed with him a Jew at some point.
exactly. So once you start to see people, turn into a circular firing squad, their ideas don't matter, right? If you have a goal in mind and you want, and it's an ideal, something that you want to accomplish, you don't go around literally tearing down everyone else who believes with you but happens to have like maybe a personal difference of some sort. Like you want to cooperate and figure it out, and that's like the real. You've brought it up in some of your streams. Like if the alt right really wants to accomplish something, the white nationalist people, they can build. They should have bought a lot of land somewhere in the middle of nowhere and started their separate society, and tried to do it the way that they said, but they never would, because they can't stand each other. They're temperamental people, and you can see it the way they treat each other. And by the way, I think if they ever did do something like that, I think many of them would end up leaving because they couldn't stand it, right? There's a lot of these utopian societies that start people, the Oneida community, things like that. I live close to Shaker Heights. There were the Shakers over here. They all have a flaw, right? You can't really control community behavior to every level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think really is the Achilles heel of the alt right. It's the way they really, it's their behavior towards each other.
No, I'm not doubting you on that. One more question from the audience for you. Are you a 9/11 truther or skeptic?
Well, I would say that I am not either of them. I just think that we're basically living in a reality where there's a lot that's just still not been revealed. Like the 28 pages, that was a big issue that they were hiding for many years. And unfortunately, we're probably, like you said with the JFK assassination, we might never see the whole story. And that's something that distinguishes me from a 9/11 truther, right? A lot of these people think that there is some sort of vault somewhere or some sort of thumb drive that'll reveal everything. I don't think it's that simple. And just in the example of the five dancing Israelis, there's a major piece of evidence that they don't have that would answer what the question, what they think happened, which would be the camcorder footage that has never appeared, because it's possible that they weren't holding a camcorder. It's more than likely that it was the still camera that they were found with, right?
Right.
So I'm not a truther and I'm not a skeptic. I just think that you can't just fill in the blanks based on evidence that's out there and decide, oh, this is what really happened because this guy owned this building and Bernie Carrick took this loan from this guy. If you read through their stuff, it's not the way to piece together a mystery. It just isn't. So, sorry if I throw cold water on the way people think, but in his case, not sorry. I mean, I just think he's a crank. One thing I wanted to mention too. So with him specifically, he claims, like you said, to have all this inside info. This is a guy, Ryan Dawson, when there was the downing of that Ukrainian airliner. In the days following, he went on press TV and he was denying to the world. He's like, there's no way. This was obviously brought down by external forces, I think he even said from a missile from a U.S. ship or something. He was denying it. And then Iran admitted that they said it was a mistake. They admitted that they had shot down the airliner, and Ryan Dawson still took the interview and posted it on his BitChute, meaning that he's even willing to post something where he's denying that Iran did something that Iran later admitted, and he just keeps the interview up. So I do think it is about him feeding his own ego. Like it's not about even the topic. It's about, yes, this is what I do.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you on any of that, but I got to run, man. It's been a really great interview. I really have enjoyed this. Tomorrow, guys, I will not be here for my day show. I have to go to a meeting, obviously in New York City, which is awful because it's New York City. But so I will be around at night, though. I'm going to be doing 2 streams tomorrow night. I'm looking forward to it. Make sure you go sub to Chef Leopard's channel. Can you let everyone know where to find you?
Yeah, it's Bold Like a Leopard on YouTube, but I'd rather have you on BitChute or on Library. So it's Bold Like a Leopard on Library /Odyssey, and Chef Leopard, one word, on BitChute.
Nice. Thanks, guys, for tuning up. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. I will be back tomorrow night, and I will talk to everybody soon. Thank you very much.
Fellow Americans, tonight I am speaking to you because there is a growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border.
In all honesty, a border wall or steel slats won't work. But great bodies of water will separate us from the horrible Mexican rapists. Introducing the 2019 Trump Great Border Moat. Stocked with the most aggressive penis fish, incredible man-eating alligators, and unbelievable genetically modified moose-cocked rape dolphins, as well as flying, migrant-eating sharkfish. So incredible.
I swore to protect our country, and that is what I will always do. So help me God. Thank you and good night.